Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistico of the Des Moines Register. Three-man weave time for the Hawkeyes 35-0. I almost said Tax Layer Bowl loss. Citrus Bowl loss to the Tennessee Vols, joined by Dargan Southard, who's been great to join us with his Tennessee expertise this week, and Tyler Tashman, who has a piece already up about the offense. Big shock. That becomes the story of the day. First time the Hawkeyes have been shut out in back-to-back games since 1966, guys. Disappointing day all across the board. You get first and goal or at the 4-yard line in the first quarter, and you still don't score in the game. Pretty. The total result startled me, but once you saw how bad Deacon Hill was playing, it does not surprise me that it ended up 35-0. Tyler, haven't talked. I like to talk to you during the games. You know, we can exchange thoughts, all that. I haven't got to talk to you yet, so I'd love to hear what you thought about the game.
I think we knew Iowa's offense was bad, right? Like that, this isn't new information. Like it's already pretty well documented how bad Iowa's offense has been. But I think it's like reopening the wound, right? You are reminded where Iowa's offense is. And to me, it was kind of an indication of like how much work is ahead for whoever is going to be the next offensive coordinator. And I know that to a certain extent, they're not going to be able to totally overhaul things because it's going to be contingent upon what Kirk Ferentz wants. But there's a lot of work to be done, and the end of the game was it was mercifully done, at 35-0. But it feels like the kind of rebuilding of this offense is just beginning. This is now officially we're moving into the start of trying to get Iowa's offense moving, back into the right direction, because it's fundamentally, I mean, it's cracked. What we saw today was similar to what has been the entire season, is that teams stacking the box because Iowa is not a threat to pass the ball, and that makes it tough to run the ball, obviously. And then Iowa's passing game isn't good enough to make teams pay for that. So it's kind of like a cycle that just cannibalizes itself. There's no really light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to how can Iowa wriggle itself out of that cycle. But now new offensive coordinator coming in, I guess if you look at it as a light, as a change, that's now we're at the starting point, I think.
Yeah, mercifully ending. I think the Brian Ferentz era is the right way to put it. Got over 500 three-word headlines already. We'll probably get a few more by the time this show is over. But some of them are basically the tone is "Thank you, Beth." For ending this 2 months ago. And all the chatter, back-to-back shutouts. Iowa has not scored a touchdown in the last 10 quarters of football. Dating back to the second quarter of the Nebraska game. So many stats we can tick off here. But Dargan, I want to get to you because, being around Tennessee media a little bit during the game and this week, the sense I got today was like, we knew Iowa's offense was bad, but we didn't know it was this bad. And I think your Tennessee friends were probably right. That maybe I'm not saying Iowa's defense was any kind of fraud. I'm not saying that at all. But the defense was exposed a little bit today, especially against the run and that fast tempo. Jay Higgins even said as much afterwards. They needed them to huddle up, and they wouldn't, and it was just a pretty relentless pace. So kudos to your Vols. But what did you see out there?
Yeah, it was certainly a valid statement pregame to wonder if Iowa's defense and its lack of seeing anything like how Tennessee operates was going to be, a huge factor. And, I think certainly everybody who covers Iowa and has seen this program up close this year figured that Phil Parker, maybe caught off guard a little bit to start, but would find a way to settle in and really show what they had all year. And, in some of those games where, like the Ohio State game last year or the Michigan game this year, where the score is lopsided, but you can kind of say, oh, well, Iowa's defense did all they could. I'm not really sure you could say that today because, Tennessee was able to run the ball better than pretty much any team has against Iowa this year. Jabari Small and Jalen Wright being out didn't matter all that much really at all because Dylan Sampson hopped right in and, took over from the start. And, the quote that you said about Jay Higgins, I watched that and it was interesting, saying that, if a lot of those plays had happened with Tennessee huddling, that maybe they would have had more success. And I feel like that's exactly what Tennessee speed can do to you. Is it just gets you so out of whack to where things that would be makeable and would be, plays that you feel like Iowa's defense has shown it can make all year, all of a sudden those gimmies are off the table. And then then you kind of have everything snowball and it turns into what it did. So, yeah, I told everybody it's nails on a chalkboard watching this Iowa offense, and somehow they, I think, got worse and had probably the worst performance of the season today. And it does feel kind of fitting that Marshall Meter scores the final points of the season.
Oh, wow. That's a good pull there, Dargan.
So,
Wow. I'm not laughing, but I am. That's crazy. That
Yeah.
seems like forever ago.
I know. And so it just kind of felt like the Michigan game, and more so today, that rent was kind of due on Iowa, who's been able to pull out all these wins and all these positive things that they can point to at the end and say, hey, we won the game, even though it was ugly as, all in. Today it kind of all snowballed together and you get the ugly score that you got. And really, really intensifies the urgency, I feel like, moving forward.
Yeah, could it be Hawk Slayer 2.0? I'm kind of writing a column to that regard. That'll be up tomorrow morning. Obviously, my thoughts are online now, 2,700 words, and Tyler's story is already up. I know Dargan did a good job with the live blog today, so good efforts by everyone. Drew, it's kind of funny. As you mentioned, I want to get to the quarterback, just so you guys all know. We're going to quarterback here in a second, and Brian Ferentz and offense. But isn't it crazy? Like, Drew Stevens had all those struggles against Nebraska, and then he hasn't been able to attempt a single kick. He hasn't even attempted a kick since.
I mean, really, there's only been 2 possessions in the last 2 games where I was even been remotely in field goal range. The Jazz Patterson fumble against Michigan and the end zone interception today. So,
and they could have tried a field goal. I think they were down 28-0 on Marco line as his first drive. They got deep into the territory. They decided to go for it. They weren't going to win the game anyway. I kind of wish they would have kicked the field goal. I mean, I know that's kind of maybe a pansy thing to say, but give Drew Stevens a little confidence. You're trying to build. You're not going to win the game. You're trying to build. And that was kind of my point in my first take of the day, guys. And I want to get your thoughts on it too, is seeing Tennessee's true freshman quarterback, Nico, let's see if I can do it. Iamaleava, right? Iamaleava. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we probably, between Dolph and Bob Kessling and the guys on ESPN, I think there was about 50 different pronunciations.
Anyway, their freshman quarterback, he got all the 1 reps in bowl prep. And just after watching today, now I didn't write this ahead of time, so it's a little bit of Monday morning quarterback, but we talked about it. Why not give Marco Linez the bowl prep? Why not give him this shot? It's an exhibition game. I realize you're going for number 11, but he went out there and gave him a spark, did he not? I mean, there were cheers in the Iowa crowd. His very first play of the game is a 9-yard scramble. And I realize, Dargan, you could probably tell me how many reserves were on the field. Probably some. I wasn't studying it that closely. I was trying to file for deadline, but I don't know, Tyler, we've talked a lot this year about, the quarterback situation. Why not give Joe Labus a chance? Then it became, why not give Marco Linez a chance? It's just constant for 10 games. We've seen Deacon Hill turn the ball over constantly. The one thing that Iowa stresses is ball control, game managing, security, protect the football, win the turnover margin. Iowa loses the turnover margin for the season for the first time since 2014. This quarterback did not protect the ball. He couldn't move. All of a sudden, Marco Linez is in there. He can move. At least it creates something else for the defense to worry about.
He came in and it was pretty immediate. I mean, he was built as a guy that could use his legs a little bit more, and he showed that. I mean, the passing is obviously a work in progress, but I mean, he's a true freshman. But I mean, it's still a work in progress with Deacon, so it wasn't like there was some major drop off there, but it was exciting what he could do with his legs, and it kind of makes you wonder like how many other games could Iowa possibly have won or gotten close in if he was in there at quarterback, using his legs. But yeah, I think it is just a very confounding decision when you look back. Kirk Ferentz stressed, what was done in practice was a factor in who was out there, and obviously we don't get to see what's going on in practice. But I don't know. It looks like a really stubborn decision, and I know that Kirk is very set in his ways with how Iowa plays football offensively with the scheme, and look, it's worked. I mean, Iowa got to the Big Ten championship this season, but it felt like a decision that it just was questionable, and that's putting it really lightly, of why Marco wasn't given a chance earlier on. And on top of that, it's like, well, where does Iowa go at quarterback next season? Because Cade McNamara, you hope that he's going to be Iowa probably starter come opening day, but he's coming off a consecutive season-ending injuries. Joe Labus is in the portal. Marco Linus, is he going to be in the mix? I don't think you want to go into week one having Deacon Hill the starter. This has been part of the issue of Iowa's offense, is that there's been a revolving door of quarterbacks. When you look at, Alex Padilla, Spencer Petras, last season, Joe Labus getting the start in the bowl game. That's been one of the many, not the only issue with Iowa's offense, but one of the many issues is that there's just instability at quarterback. There hasn't been a guy to just kind of be average, run of the mill. I think there was hope that Cade McNamara could have been that guy. Wasn't able to stay healthy. I mean, maybe he can be that next season, but just the instability, inconsistency, incompetence at quarterback, factored in with a bunch of other things offensively, have just really weighed down the unit.
Well, and just the mobility piece is something even Joe Evans talked about. Like, yeah, it's actually really, that really was difficult for us to stop because he can do both things. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's right. And again, we're not saying like, yeah, Marco should have been the guy in week 6 or anything like that, but to just never even give him a sniff or a look when things were going badly. It just, when you see kind of the spark he gave them, it boggles the mind. He obviously did something to elevate to number 2 during the bye week. We saw him getting the 2 reps up at Wrigley Field. So even if you're not going to start him in the game, Dargan, bring him in at halftime when it's 14-0. Bring him in after Deacon Hill fumbles at his own 2-yard line. They waited way too long to even try to ignite a spark. It just, again, the stubbornness. I think they're just so desperate for that stability that they tried to manufacture stability with Deacon Hill.
Well, sorry, if I can just jump in, it's almost like they're trying to find so much stability that it's creating instability, right? Like, it's actually having the opposite effect of just running the same guy out there, it's the same person, but it's so much inconsistency. It's having kind of a reverse effect.
Yeah, and I think
go ahead.
I think the biggest thing, or among the biggest things that's the most frustrating for Iowa fans right now is, it's one thing to acknowledge that, Iowa has to play to be successful a little backwards than a lot of teams. And that works when you don't turn the ball over. And now, not only has Deacon Hill not accelerated this offense at all, but now he's costing his team points because, today he literally gift wrapped Tennessee 14 points on the pick 6 and not holding onto the ball basically up against his own goal line. And so when you have that contradiction, and it's been that way pretty much Deacon Hill's entire time in there, he's been a turnover liability more or less from the second he got in there. And so, I think once you see that contradiction play out on the field with, hey, even if we don't have a gunslinger back there, if he protects the ball, then that's what we want. When that's not happening and you're still not making a change, it's easy to see where the frustration is because, in my mind, there really is no risk to go to Linus at any point because it can't get any worse. Like, there are so many metrics that show that Deacon Hill has been one of, and in times, the worst college football quarterback this year. And so a lot of times when you have that kind of gray area of who should be a quarterback, a lot of it is the risk of playing the wild card, and maybe he isn't as good as the more established. But that's not really the case here, because we've seen Deacon Hill really not get a whole lot better than when he took over when Cade McNamara got hurt. So I feel the frustration from Iowa fans for sure, because it's not, it's been, Cade McNamara has been hurt since week 5, and it's not really been any different since then.
Yeah, and this was Deacon Hill was not on this schedule. This was not what he was meant to be doing. Was leading a Big Ten team right now. He came here to kind of develop, and he got thrust into the spot because Iowa was deficient at that position and injured, and he just it also speaks to Brian Ferentz's inability as a quarterbacks coach the last 2 years. I mean, it just nothing really progressed, and a lot of fans have made this point. I like the point. I mean, Kirk Ferentz was quick to change kickers like that with a really, really good kicker against Nebraska, but took so long to even try someone else. And it just that part did not make any sense. Deacon Hill ends up with 11 fumbles this year, 8 interceptions, and Pro Football Focus ranks him as the worst quarterback in Power 5, a regular quarter of guys with, minimum attempts. So that's a pretty large body of work. And it's we're not like dogging him individually and his effort. And he's obviously a great teammate, a nice guy. He's the best that they could find, and they had to throw him out there and ahead of his time. And so it's more an indictment on the coaches, was what I think we're all saying, Tyler.
Yeah, no, and I think that brings up a good point, because the contrast between what Iowa does offensively or the elite level that Iowa's at defensively makes the contrast with what it's at offensively even wider, because Iowa defensively does an incredible job developing guys. I mean, look at they go and get 3-star dudes that aren't necessarily heralded, like Jay Higgins. His only Power 5 offer was Iowa. A guy like Cooper DeJean from small town Iowa. They do an incredible job of evaluating talent, finding diamonds in the rough, and that's a testament to Phil Parker. But it makes that discrepancy between what Iowa does offensively or defensively and offensively even more obvious, because outside of tight ends, they haven't been able to develop guys like they do defensively. They haven't been able to find those kind of diamonds in the rough. I mean, you look at the play that like John Nestor made today, and you can already kind of see flashes of what he can do. We've seen flashes of what Cohen Entringer can do. You can see guys in the pipeline like coming up and being developed, and Jay Higgins waiting his turn. It just doesn't seem like that happens offensively. And I think part of that comes down to coaching and who is going to be coming in as Iowa's next offensive coordinator. But you also have to understand with that Phil Parker has laid the groundwork over a long stretch of time. So Iowa's next offensive coordinator isn't just going to be able to snap his fingers and develop everyone just like that, or, wave a magic wand or take a magic pill and everything's going to be great. Like, I think Iowa's offense is there's so much work to be done that it's not going to be able to be reversed in like a single year or a single offseason. This is going to take some groundwork. It's going to take some major rebuilding to get it back on the right track.
Well, let's just segue right into the offensive coordinator discussion. We don't have to get into it too long, because we're probably going to be talking a lot about it whenever the hire is made in, about 2 weeks or whatever it is. So, Kirk Ferentz talked a little bit about it after the game. He was asked about it the very last question, and he gave a really good answer. I'm including a lot of it in my column that I'll post tomorrow morning, but you can also check out our video at Hawk Central from the press conference. But, he basically said that, it starts with hiring a good person, a good fit, all that stuff, but also said he feels great about the direction it is going. And on the quarterback topic, guys, this offensive coordinator will hopefully help turn the page in terms of a run pass threat at the quarterback position. They may not call it dual threat, but you got to have somebody who's a little bit mobile back there. And you have to believe, don't you, that a fresh set of eyes at offensive coordinator will realistically decide, you know what, Marco Linus has a little bit more upside there and spark than Deacon Hill. Now, they're going to both get a lot of spring reps because Cade's probably not going to be in spring ball, other than throwing on the side or whatever. But I think, don't you think that, start with you, Dargan, don't you think that whoever this coordinator is going to kind of recognize, you got to have somebody else as the backup and not Deacon Hill. No offense to him, unless he really makes a big jump.
Yeah, and I think what you hope if you're an Iowa fan is the way that these last two games to the season unfolded, where it was so, there was no way that you could spin it any other way of, well, they found a way to win the game, or, this or that. Like, the urgency should definitely be increased based on how this season ended, because, again, it wasn't a long-term, this team definitely had a hurdle that it had to clear when Cade McNamara got hurt. And, down the stretch, there was definitely moments where you felt like maybe this team, if there's a loss that pops in there, does that increase the urgency or not? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you got to think that whomever comes in here, there seems to certainly be a valid fear that, this offense under Kirk Ferentz is largely going to stay the same and is largely going to be run similarly, just with a different person there. So that's a valid concern, I feel like, and one I was going to have to make sure that it's not replicating it, and that's certainly going to be a challenge to do so when you have somebody who's clearly been set in his ways for a long time and is resistant at times to making moves.
Let's go to 3-word headlines because we're running a little long here. I know you guys want to watch Texas, Washington, and these always give us little avenues into other topics, right? So let's start this. Mark Phillips, good in practice. That was a popular one. Jenks Hawk, stumbling downhill. Austin Lego, stubbornness over progress. John Wayne, back from the dead here. Offense in ashes. Ice Cream Man, Beth gets vindicated, as I said. B-Lap Hawk fan. Brian's final gift. Yeah, it was quite the exit, was it? Now, we talked a lot about what would Brian do in his last Big Ten championship game, or in the Big Ten championship game. What would he do for a send-off? Win one for Brian. Well, boy, this is not the exit that he would want for his legacy in even getting another job, right, Tyler?
Yeah, I think part of the importance of moving on to a new offensive coordinator, it feels like there needs to be new energy. Like, it just felt like the fan base, it was just fed up with what the product had been, and you can kind of get a sense when there needs to be a change, and when fans are kind of losing interest, even, which is apathy is, I think, much worse than anger and frustration. But yeah, it just felt like part of the thing with whoever it is going to be is that they're going to bring in new energy, going to inject some optimism and some change and hope, which Iowa's offense, you could make an argument coming into this season there was some hope, but that's part of the battle is the kind of perception and the energy around the unit.
Drew Kleesner. We've got a few more Brian Ferentz related ones. Big shock. What's the upside? Hawks 101. It's finally over. This was my favorite one, probably, from Joe Hugan. It would have been a little bit too much, but it could have been a headline for a newspaper, like a Sunday paper. Dies on Hill. Great double meaning there because the Hawkeyes died on their hill of Deacon Hill at quarterback. A good one. Here's another one, guys. Eric Bappy, changing the subject here a little bit. Thanks, Joe Evans. ends up with what a career. Ends up 4th all time in sacks at the University of Iowa. The Ames walk-on quarterback is now behind only Jared DeVries, whose record will never be broken, 43 sacks. I think it was Mike Wells. God, I'm blanking. I think it was Mike Wells. Yeah, it's number 2. And then I wrote in the story. But anyway, he's number 4. I think it was AJ Epinesa, wasn't it? No, he passed Epinesa today. Anyway, 28 sacks. He had 4 today. Joe Evans, Iowa had 6 sacks. What did you think? Either one of you.
Yeah, it was one of the funny things that happened in the build up to this game and talking to different Tennessee people was, I was like, hey, if you take a former high school quarterback, make him a walk on, and have him starting on a defense, that in like the SEC or in Tennessee's world just sounds absurd and would never happen. Iowa has at least 2 former high school walk on quarterbacks that are big pieces on the defense. And Joe Evans, his rise from, like we said, pretty much nothing in terms of recruiting prowess to this point. Definitely was able to carve out a pretty solid career, and one that, I'm sure will be talked about in future meetings and recruiting pitches and all that to the walk-ons, which has obviously been a huge part of this program for a while.
I'm really sorry I botched that, everyone. Jared DeVries, Mike Wells, Matt Roth are 1, 2, 3. Matt Roth with 30, Joe Evans 28, Larry Blue and AJ Epinesa with 26.5 each. So he passed both of those guys today. Hawk Dad, Hannah Stolke's father, stepfather. Run Marco run. Run Marco run. Add your name, says mobile quarterback mandatory going forward. So one more thing, guys. Torrey Taylor sets the NCAA punting record for yardage. Jay Higgins ties Andre Jackson's single-season tackles record. Those were the highlights of the day for the Hawkeyes. Anything else stand out to you, Tyler, as you watched the game that we didn't talk about? Have we not talked about the goal line interception yet that he threw? I don't think we did.
I don't know. Maybe not specific.
First and goal from the 4.
Mm-hmm.
To throw that interception, you had to get 3 points there.
Well, all of his turnovers were like major costly, because you had the one that was near Iowa's own goal line, the one that was near Tennessee's goal line, and then the pick 6. So I think the last thing I'll add is, for all the talk about Tennessee's opt-outs going into the game, or opt-outs, or whoever wasn't, all the guys that weren't playing, and the fact that Iowa had so many of their regular guys that were available to play, Iowa looked like the team that was like a shell of its normal self, and Tennessee looked like it had all of its regulars playing, and it just seemed like kind of a lack of attention to detail, and like the Deacons turnovers speak to that, but also you had like that there was that delay a game call, and it just seemed it just seemed undisciplined. And it's like, if you have all this time to prepare for the game, you hope maybe the team can make some jumps in the time off, and it seemed like regression.
Yeah, no question. What was I going to say? There was a lot of 3-word headlines. I didn't read any of them, but a lot of them were like fire both Ferentzes, that type of thing. I think there's some frustration with Kirk here, and I'm not there at all. I think this new offensive coordinator is going to be give this program a needed fresh start at that position. And I guess the criticism of Kirk, you could say, would be he just held on to Brian too long and wasn't able to fire him himself, and that's why Barbara Wilson and Beth Getz had to stand in, and I don't disagree with that. But yeah, I feel like personally the culture, the recruiting, the whole structure of the program is in a really good spot. It's just this one little thing, the offense, that they got to fix. Dargan, give you one more word here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Obviously, you and several other people have made the comparison to the 2014 game. And, generally speaking, the program is in a better spot than it was. But the one thing that you hope mirrors that is the kind of self-reflection that came out of that. Obviously, you recovering them and remember everything that they changed, but it seemed like that was pivotal because Kirk Ferentz realized that changes needed to be adjusted and made them. And then obviously next year was really good. So you hope that this game, and as bad as things got down the stretch offensively, that creates the urgency to where even somebody like Kirk Ferentz, who is not afraid to show his stubbornness, realizes that, hey, as much as we like to do business the way that we do, it's gotten way out of whack and way lopsided. And it's just, there has to be adjustments or, because, as much as you could say, oh, Iowa was one, bad call away from being 11-1 in the regular season, they were also a few plays away from being like 7-5. So you hope that if you're an Iowa fan, that the urgency is there going into next season.
Tyler, last point I'll make to you here or have you talk about is I messaged you, I think it was yesterday maybe. I was like, after Luke Lachey came back, whenever that was, and Jay Higgins was like, we might be covering a pretty good team next year. I come out of this game not feeling the same. I feel like there's cracks here. Oregon's coming into the Big Ten. I know they don't play them next year. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, all coming into the Big Ten. And, you just think about the blowout losses this year, 31-0, 26-0, 35-0. Think about the 54-10 to Ohio State last year, 42-3 in the Big Ten title game a couple years ago to Michigan. Like, these blowout losses are concerning, and they're adding up, and they're not staying close in these games. So I don't know. We're talking about them as a possible playoff team next year if everyone comes back, but I agree with Dargan. I think there's just got to be a little bit of self-reflection here and maybe some changes, whatever those need to be.
No, I think you make good points in that. The program, I feel like with the culture, recruiting, all of that is in a good spot. Like you said, the missing piece is Iowa's offense, which on one hand, it's just one piece, but I think that today was a reminder of how wide that, how important that piece is, right? Because of how far it is behind, right? That piece is far away from being put in place. So it does feel like there's sort of a duality in how close Iowa is to being kind of in those elites of the Big Ten, because they only need the offense to be good, but they also need the offense to be good, and the offense is not even close. Like it's a major project right now. So it's one piece, but it's also one piece. So
good way to finish, everyone. Thank you both for joining me on this. I know you guys want to watch the games too, so we'll let the Hawk fans get back to it. Let you guys get back to it. I got to finish my column for the morning, and then somehow drive my way back to Iowa. It might be a while, but Tyler will be up at the Wisconsin men's game tomorrow, right? It's tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Dargan, Southard, keep on doing a good job with the women. And Tyler, thanks to you. Looking forward to working with you guys in 2024. Should be fun winter. There were a lot of Caitlin tweets by the 3-word headlines, by the way. I skipped some of those, but women's basketball school was one of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, for Dargan Southern, Tyler Tashman, Chad Lysico, so long from Hawk Central. We'll talk to you throughout this year. Thanks for joining us.